And welcome back to Turnip's Digest. I hope that everything is going well for everyone, especially considering that this is going to be the latest starting Turnip's Digest, I think, in the history of the show. This was due to accommodating our good friends, the Prudentialist and the Old Glory Club president, Mr. Redhawk, as they went over some. If I remember correctly, I believe it was the government targeting of certain manosphere personalities, and labeling them as potential threats against the current regime, basically. They started that stream at 9:15 Central Time, which is the time that anyone cares about if you are in fact anybody. So that was what was going on this morning. So hopefully our non-Protestant audience, who does not adhere to the glorious Protestant work ethic that has Turnip's Digest usually starting earlier, can now benefit from the stream. So beyond all of that, if you do enjoy the show and want it to continue, donations are appreciated. There's a link in the description if you prefer a non-alphabet alternative, where less of your money will be taken by people that dislike you. Or super chats are always welcome, if you are so inclined to give. So with all that out of the way, I think that we can be very much to the point this morning, because I'm going to be solo streaming for the second time on this channel. I do not want to waffle. I think we can just get straight to the point. We're going to be talking today about a man that's more known for his philosophy and maybe even potentially some theology, but that's not the subjects we're going to be focusing on. The topic of the stream today is going to be Søren Kierkegaard's attack upon the Danish state church, and what he considered the corruption that it was bringing to Christianity and its doctrines. We're going to be having three major personalities in this story that Kierkegaard is going to be writing about. We have Kierkegaard himself. He's going to be writing several articles in various newspapers, most importantly, The Fatherland. And then we're going to have a recently deceased Bishop Mynster, and this might be a good time to say, I'm not going to be pronouncing everything as it probably should be. These are going to be thoroughly Americanized in their pronunciations. The second personality we have is a Bishop Mynster, who was, if not the head of the Danish state church, he was certainly an extremely important figure, one who was very important to Kierkegaard throughout his personal life, and he has been very popular with the Danish state church, partly because he has a doctrine of just getting along, preaching Christianity, doing all the things that you need to do, and then just sitting back and being happy with the good that you're doing in the world. Certainly no boats are being rocked. Nothing extreme is being taught. It's very much peace, comfort, and happiness, and this has endeared him quite greatly to the clergy and to a good section of Danish society. And then beyond Bishop Mynster and Kierkegaard, we have Mynster's replacement, if I remember correctly, Professor Martinson, who is going to, or eventually Bishop Martinson, who is going to be very much lauding the legacy of the other Bishop Mynster. So Martinson and Mynster both really like to get along, preach peace, comfort, happiness, and whatever else, and make Christianity more about that than any alternative. So this is going to be coming once again from a selection of Kierkegaard's work titled Attack Upon Christendom. It's a selection of articles that were very public. Kierkegaard was writing for a general audience basically for the first time, and not just for philosophers and theologians and select people. This is for the public, and Kierkegaard has a major problem with what has become of Christianity, at the very least in Denmark. And that's why he's going to be talking about Protestantism, particularly in Denmark. That's going to be a phrase we see quite often. But this does not mean that it is only a Danish phenomenon or even a Protestant phenomenon. In fact, many people should be able to draw parallels as we go through some of these articles. And then right before we jump in, just to summarize the preface of the translator for this translation, not actually about anything that he translated. He's mostly dispelling the idea that Kierkegaard started lashing out against the state church because of some ailment of his. He had gone crazy, he had been sick, he became grouchy and grumpy, and therefore he started launching a bunch of public attacks on people that used to be his friend. This was a narrative that was pushed about Kierkegaard throughout the decades after he died. They thought that he went crazy. He was recently perceived beforehand as being a very good conservative within the church. So this thing is just kind of out of nowhere. He was out of character, so they say, and you can just disregard all of these public attacks against the Danish state church. The translator has made a very good note, and you can read the preface yourself. I believe you can find a PDF of this just by searching Kierkegaard Attack Upon Christendom on any search engine. The translator dispels this myth just by saying you can find a lot of these critiques and more that weren't even used in Kierkegaard's own journals going back decades. So this is a heartfelt, this is very much a premeditated and planned attack that Kierkegaard has been working on. And he is really trying to intervene to save a shred of proper Christianity, I think might be a good way to characterize it. So that's your background. We have the three personalities. Kierkegaard does not like the way that Christianity is going in the Danish state church, and he's going to start off by writing a very public criticism of his recently deceased friend, Bishop Mynster, brought about because Martinson and others within the Danish state church are praising him for being a great witness of the truth. So that's our introduction, and it'll become clear as we go on who the characters are, what their motivations are, and what we can really extrapolate from this. And once again, all of this did actually happen. This is more history than anything else, which is also kind of unique with Kierkegaard. So hopefully everyone can see this on stream. This is going to be starting here. The first article collected from the Fatherland in 1854 December. And it's titled, "Was Bishop Mynster a witness to the truth? One of the genuine witnesses to the truth? Is this the truth?" So that's already a very provocative title, questioning whether someone really is a proper witness to Christianity. But Kierkegaard's going to start by discussing a sermon that was given in the fifth Sunday after Epiphany. Kierkegaard writes, "In the address which Professor Martinson delivered on the fifth Sunday after Epiphany, the Sunday preceding the burial of Bishop Mynster, a speech of remembrance, it might be called for the reason that it brought to Professor Martinson's remembrance the vacant episcopal see. In this address, Bishop Mynster is represented as one of the genuine witnesses to the truth, this being affirmed in the strongest and most decisive terms it would be possible to use. With the figure of the deceased bishop, his life and the manner of it, and the issue of it, before our eyes, we are exhorted, quote, to imitate the faith of the true guide, the genuine witness to the truth. To imitate his faith, that is, as was said expressly of Bishop Mynster, was shown, quote, not merely by word and profession, but in deed and in truth. The deceased bishop is, by Professor Martinson, introduced, quote, into the holy chain of witnesses to the truth which stretches through the ages, from the days of the apostles, etc. Against this I must protest, and now that Bishop Mynster is dead, I can speak willingly, but in this place very briefly, and not at all about what determined me to assume the relationship to him which I assumed. Once again, Mynster and the Kierkegaards were very close friends, so it's very strange that Kierkegaard is writing against him publicly after he has died. Kierkegaard continues, if the word preaching suggests more particularly what is said, written, printed, the word, the sermon, then the fact that, in this respect, to allude to only one thing, Bishop Mynster's preaching, soft pedals, slurs over, suppresses, omits something decisively Christian, something which appears to us men inopportune, which would make our life strenuous, hinder us from enjoying life, that part of Christianity which has to do with dying from the world, by voluntary renunciation, by hating oneself, by suffering for the doctrine, etc. To see this, one does not have to be particularly sharp-sighted if one puts the New Testament alongside of Mynster's sermons. If on the other hand, the word preaching, proclaiming the gospel, leads one to think more particularly how far the preacher's life expresses what he says, and note that Christianly this is the decisive thing, whereby Christianity has wished to secure itself against getting docents with our definite character, instead of witnesses. The fact that Bishop Mynster's preaching of Christianity was not in character, that outside the quiet hours he was not in character, not even in the role of his own sermons, which, nevertheless, as has been said, have in comparison with the New Testament mitigated the Christian conceptions considerably. One does not need to be particularly sharp-sighted to see this. in case one who hears and reads him is duly acquainted with his sermons. In 1848 and thereafter, this was visible even to blind admirers, if they were sufficiently acquainted with his sermons to know that they and the quiet hours would prompt one to expect. So when alongside of it one lays the New Testament, Bishop Mynster's proclamation of Christianity was a very questionable sort of preaching, especially on the part of one who was a witness to the truth. But then, to my mind, the genuine thing about him was that, as I am firmly convinced, he was willing to admit before God and to himself that by no manner of means was he a witness to the truth. To my mind, this admission was the genuine thing about him. But if, from the pulpit, Bishop Mynster is to be depicted and canonized as a witness of the truth, one of the genuine witnesses to the truth, then a protest must be made. I see that the Berlin News, a Copenhagen paper, which is the official newspaper, just as Professor Martensen is the official preacher, expresses the opinion that Professor Martensen, who with notable haste forestalls the interment and the monument too, which was to be erected to the deceased bishop, has by this address erected a beautiful and worthy monument to the deceased. I would prefer to say a worthy monument to Professor Martensen himself, but in any case, the monument cannot be ignored. Therefore, a protest must be made, which perhaps might contribute to make the monument to Professor Martensen more enduring. Bishop Mynster, a witness to the truth. You who read this must surely know what is to be understood by a witness to the truth. But let me remind you that for this it is absolutely necessary for one to suffer for the doctrine. And when it is said emphatically, one of the genuine witnesses to the truth, the word must be understood in the strictest sense. Let me then try to indicate by a few strokes what is to be understood by it in order to make it vivid to you. So, before we continue, we have this already, where Kierkegaard is come out of the gate swinging, this guy that was supposed to be a very good conservative of the Danish state church, against a deceased man whom everyone liked, including the Kierkegaards, who was supposed to be a close friend. And then the person's understudy, basically, Martensen, is basically trying to attach his legacy to Mynster's, and therefore is trying to keep the exact same doctrines promulgated from the pulpit by himself after Mynster's passing. So Kierkegaard has come out of the gate swinging, and he's saying that Mynster's life, and then by extension Martensen's, don't live up to what one would expect of a New Testament Christian. And same with their doctrines. If you put their words side by side in the New Testament, something doesn't hold up. They aren't suffering for the doctrine. They aren't denying themselves. They're trying to get the hindering parts of Christianity out of their preaching so that they can just enjoy life and get along, preach happiness and comfort. So, we'll continue just now. A witness to the truth is a man whose life from first to last is unacquainted with everything which is called enjoyment. And whether to you has been granted little or much, you know how pleasant is that which is called enjoyment. But his life, from first to last, was unacquainted with what is called enjoyment. On the other hand, from first to last it was initiated into what is called suffering. And alas, even you, who have been exempted from this the more agonizing sufferings, you know nevertheless, from your own experience, how one winces at what is called suffering. But to that his life was initiated from first to last, by experiences which are even more rarely talked about among men, because they are more rarely encountered in the world, by inward conflicts, by fear and trembling, by trepidation, by anguish of the soul, by agony of spirit, being tried besides that by all the sufferings which are more commonly talked of in the world. A witness to the truth is a man who in poverty witnesses to the truth, in poverty, in lowliness, in abasement, and so is unappreciated, hated, abhorred, and then derided, insulted, mocked. His daily bread perhaps he did not always have, so poor was he, but the daily bread of persecution he was richly provided with every day. For him, there was never promotion, except in an inverse sense, downward, step by step. A witness to the truth, one of the genuine witnesses to the truth, is a man who is scourged, maltreated, dragged from one prison to the other, and then at last, the last promotion, whereby he is admitted into the first class as defined by the Christian protocol among the genuine witnesses to the truth. Then at last, for this is indeed one of the most For this is indeed one of those genuine witnesses to the truth of whom Professor Martinson speaks, then at last crucified or beheaded or burnt or roasted on a gridiron, his lifeless body thrown by the executioner in an out-of-the-way place, thus a witness to the truth is buried, or burnt to ashes and cast to the four winds, so that every trace of the filth, which the apostle says he was, might be obliterated. This is a witness to the truth. His life and career, his death and burial, and Bishop Mynster, says Professor Martinson, was one of the genuine witnesses to the truth. Is this the truth? To speak thus, is this perhaps also a way of witnessing to the truth? And by that address did Professor Martinson himself appear in the character of a witness to the truth, one of the genuine witnesses to the truth? Verily, there is that which is more contrary to Christianity, and to the very nature of Christianity, than any heresy, any schism, more contrary than all heresies and all schisms combined. So that is, to play Christianity. But precisely in the very same sense that the child plays soldier, it is playing Christianity to take away the danger. Christianly, witness and danger correspond, and in place of this to introduce power, to be a danger for others, worldly goods, advantages, luxurious enjoyment of the most exquisite refinements, and then to play the game that Bishop Mynster was a witness to the truth, one of the genuine witnesses to the truth, to play it with such frightful earnestness that one cannot bring the game to a stop, but keeps on playing it into heaven itself, plays Bishop Mynster on into the holy chain of witnesses to the truth, which stresses from the days of the apostles to our time. So, to summarize what we just read there, Kierkegaard is absolutely obliterating this idea that the Danish clergy are witnesses to the truth. He is saying they are not suffering for it. They are preaching things that are socially acceptable. People love them. They are very rich. They are gaining riches. And nothing really is controversial about them. Whereas what you see when people preach genuine Christianity is abhorrent. People reject them. They die very painful and martyr-like deaths. These clergymen, according to Kierkegaard, are doing no such thing. In fact, they're doing the opposite. They're introducing enjoyment and luxury and generally hedonism into Christianity and preaching that as real Christianity, and then applauding themselves whenever one of their teachers dies and they are to be interned into this great chain of witnesses to the truth, as Kierkegaard talks about it. So from this first piece here, we can see that this is not just Kierkegaard lashing out against people randomly. He is saying that Christianity has terribly mutated in Denmark. People in Denmark have gotten so comfortable, and certainly the churches have as well, and they keep preaching comfort and peace and enjoyment and all these other things, that the actual doctrine of Christianity is lost. They're not saying anything that is challenging anyone. They're not saying anything contrary to human nature. And this, according to Kierkegaard, is the most dangerous thing that one can do, to play a Christian instead of to be one. So hopefully you and the audience can start connecting why this might be relevant to the modern day, where I think just about every church, state church or free church, whatever you want to call it, is inclined to preach things that are in line with the culture. I recall when I was very much younger, when I was in early grade school, it was still common for churches to preach against very strongly things like homosexuality, at least here in the United States. In the modern day, though, just about every church is inclined to preach the opposite. They're inclined to preach that it's fine to be homosexual so long as. It's very much a change in the way that things have gone. This is the tendency that's being described here by Kierkegaard. They're going along with the things that are popular, with the things that are easy to preach, with the things that everyone wants to hear and that will make them popular and prosperous, and not actually what they are supposed to be preaching. So that's what we have set up here with this first article. There is a postscript, but you all can read it on your own time, because Kierkegaard is basically just saying that he's deliberated quite long on this, and you can see that this is not some rash lashing out or caused by some personal grievance. Rather, this is something that he's intervening with because something is wrong. So, to continue, December 30th, 1854, immediately after the last article, there the matter rests. So, we're going to keep going. Kierkegaard is going to continue taking these people to tasks, and once again, not just Mynster and Martinson, but he is going to be very much critiquing anyone that is represented by them. So, Kierkegaard starts, "To represent from the pulpit Bishop Mynster as a witness to the truth, one of the genuine witnesses to the truth, to assign him a place in the holy chain, etc. Against this a protest must be raised. There the matter rests. To represent him in this fashion is essentially to make him ridiculous, for I can easily put the thing in another way, attacking from another side. To represent a man who by preaching Christianity has attained and enjoyed in the greatest measure all possible worldly goods and enjoyments, to represent him as a witness to the truth, is as ridiculous as to talk about a maiden who is surrounded by her numerous troop of children." Maiden meaning virgin. But the fact is, as Luther would say, quote, "Everything that has to do with lechery, people in the sinful world know all about. You are promptly understood if you talk about it. But about the Christian concepts, they are not so well informed. Hence, it is that people do not understand and therefore censor it, when a protest is raised against a witness to the truth, who, from a Christian point of view, is just as ridiculous as that maiden. There are lots of things which one can be at the same time, and it is true particularly of all significant things that one can be a number of them at the same time. One can be both this and that, and at the same time a dilettante violinist, member of a lodge, Schützenkönig, etc. The significant thing has precisely this characteristic, that just in proportion as it is significant, it is less possible for a man to be that and at the same time something else. And the definition, quote, "witness to the truth," is a very domineering definition. Strictly speaking, it can be combined only with being, apart from that, nothing at all. The term witness to the truth stands in relation to the fact that Christianity is heterogeneous to the world, wherefore the witnessed must always be recognizable by heterogeneity to this world, by renunciation, by suffering, and this is the reason why such a mode of being is so little capable of being something else at the same time. But to want to have all worldly goods and advantages, the witness to the truth, being what he is precisely by renunciation and suffering, and then at the same time to be a witness to the truth, one might Christianly say, the deus of a witness is that is. Such a witness to the truth is not merely a monster but an impossibility, like a bird which is at the same time a fish, or like an iron tool which has the remarkable peculiarity of being made of wood. Such is the situation. But remember, it was not I who began the thing of measuring Bishop Mynster's life by the scale of a witness to the truth. No, it is a friend, Professor Martinson, who has done the deceased the scurvy service and furnished the occasion for me to say that, viewed under the illumination provided by Professor Martinson, Bishop Mynster was, quote, in a high degree a worldly shrewd man, but weak, self-indulgent, and great only as a disclaimer. This scurvy service, which yet cannot perhaps be called entirely disinterested, for the possible successor to the See of Sealand, who at present is the successor, was indeed well served up the suggestion of such an easy way of being himself promoted up to the rank of a witness to the truth. If there actually is in this land so little sense of what Christianity is, that a man might be unable to understand with what justification I must protest against this forgery in the strongest terms, and by drawing the most glaring contrasts, I can put the protest in another form. I maintain that by depicting from the pulpit Bishop Mynster as a witness to the truth, one of the holy chain of witnesses, a wrong is done in the highest degree to every other distinguished and well-deserving man in the land. A jurist like Privy Councillor Orsted, a poet like Heiberg, a scholar like Madvig, a physician like Bang, theatrical artists like Nielsen, Rosenkild, Pfister, and so on in so many professions. All such men, although it cannot by any means be said that in their lifetime they are more agreeably situated and get more of the earthly goods and enjoyments than Bishop Mynster got, but on the contrary may be said to be situated less agreeably. All such men have exactly the same claim as Bishop Mynster, to be buried as witnesses to the truth. But the Protestant clergy still continued to have a curious crotchet in their heads, although they have become in their existence entirely like men of every other class, who, without exceeding the limits prescribed by civil law, seek to develop what gifts they may have, and thereby strive to obtain earthly rewards and pleasures like all the rest, nevertheless, at the same time, they want to be something more, to be witnesses to the truth. And this came very clearly to evidence in the memorial address made by Professor Martinson. Therefore, a protest should be made as emphatically as possible. People's blood must be stirred, passions set in motion. And that, of course, can be done only when a man is not afraid of the immediate consequence that many will become furious at him, which he ought not to fear but to understand, as a surgeon understands that the patient will shriek and kick. A protest must be made, and the blow for the provocation should fall upon the head. And when the article came out, Professor Martinson had long been the head. So it ought to be, so it was, there the matter rests. So, just to pause for a second. What is Kierkegaard saying? Kierkegaard is saying that a great injustice has been perpetrated on any actual prophet, basically, any actual apostle, any actual Christian, by interning Bishop Mynster as some great Christian who preached the truth. It's diluting the truth. It's diluting good Christianity by calling this man who only preached peace and comfort and the worldly enjoyments that are present in the modern age. He is saying that this dilutes the truth to claim that he also preached it. And also he is saying that he's not the one that started comparing Mynster's works and preaching to the New Testament or to anything else. That was done by his supporters. He's making very, very clear the timeline that he is not the one to actually start this injustice. He is responding to it. So what we have here, though, is that the Protestant clergy, in this last paragraph especially, are very much worldly. They are in it to get earthly rewards, respectability, goods, material wealth, or something to that effect. And they are not actually in it to speak the truth, to speak the gospel. They are in no ways prepared to be hated by the world, of which Kierkegaard claims that is Christianity. So this is where Kierkegaard's issue lies, or as he keeps saying, there the matter rests. And then he's going to keep going a little bit. He says, also out of filial piety towards a deceased father, I honored the false draft, the semblance of being a man of character which Bishop Mynster presented, instead of protesting it. And he ends the quote, there the matter rests. If the friends of the deceased, his adherents and admirers, when they are a bit more composed, will not understand that at least I have not had any advantage from my relationship to Bishop Mynster, I pray them to examine the account, that in my relationship to him I have shown a resignation which very rarely is shown by a younger man to an elder, that I have done and borne what very seldom a younger man does and bears in relation to an elder. If they will not understand this, and understand also what is implied in it, that they owe me a debt of gratitude for the many years I have borne with the deceased, if they will not understand this, well, in God's name, it's their affair. So, this is a very telling paragraph here. Kierkegaard is saying that he has very faithfully served under Bishop Mynster, though he has not necessarily taken part in everything that he has preached. He has shown him good respect and everything else that one would expect. So any claims that he is just out to get Bishop Mynster, or that he's turning on him like some sort of vulture after he has gotten material benefit from Mynster, he's saying that they're wrong, and that if they are wrong, then it's their problem, not his. So he's going to go on rather. To the enemies of the deceased, I would say not to exult and rejoice as though they had gained something which, as I see it, they have not gained. Their position, as I view it, is entirely unchanged, and if the occasion were to present itself, it would not be impossible that I might still come forward in the usual way, precious memories, how gladly I did it, to fight against his enemies in behalf of Bishop Mynster, the pastor of my deceased father. In Denmark, Bishop Mynster was unique in his kind. There is only one person who is in the right against him, and that is I. I have not condemned Bishop Mynster, no, but in the hand of divine governance, I was the occasion for Bishop Mynster to pass judgment upon himself. His sermon on Sunday, either he did not know on Monday, or he dared not and would not acknowledge it as his, for ironically enough, I simple-mindedly was his own sermon on Monday. And if on Mondays Bishop Mynster had not with a worldly shrewdness shrinked the duty of assuming the logical consequence of his Sunday sermon, if he had put into effect a mode of existence, and action which corresponded with the tenor of his Sunday address, instead of helping himself out with worldly shrewdness of various patterns, his life would then have taken on an entirely different aspect. So here, Kierkegaard, perhaps arrogantly, is stating that he is the only one properly critiquing Mynster. He is not damning him to hell. Rather, what he is doing is he's saying that Mynster most certainly did not live up to the Christian ideal that everyone is claiming that he did, and most certainly he did not. He did not preach as he was supposed to. That this brought some sort of judgment upon himself because he was not actually living out that which he was preaching as a Christian on the days that he did preach a Christian sermon. And this was Kierkegaard actually observed this. So Kierkegaard is saying he's the only one to know this and how to properly critique Mynster, because there were some people that were damning him to hell, more of the radical factions. Kierkegaard does not quite agree with that. So we're going to continue just a little bit. But such a judgment only an enemy can be in haste to pronounce, as long as the man lives. He who is devoted to him says, quote, "The judgment must be postponed until the very last." He might indeed, even at the last moment, avert the judgment and do an immense amount of good by a little word. And everything ought to be done that resignation is able to do in order to move him to utter this word. So then, there the matter rests. Also, out of filial piety towards the deceased father, I honored this false draft instead of protesting it. I was his own sermon on Monday. That I was, for by enduring year after year his provocation, and enduring it moreover with unaltered resignation as I did, I have become something different from what I was, or it became clearer and clearer to me what I was. My life's misfortune, by the love of divine governance, turned out to my profit, became my good fortune. My relationship to Bishop Mynster during many years was a unity of a deeply laid purpose on my part, which I pursued with the greatest solicitude, and of my own development by the cooperation of divine governance. It will be understood, then, that I cannot take account of what every anonymous writer, every Asclepius, I do not know that word, forgive me, the signature in the Copenhagen Post, brings out in a newspaper, or what a serious-minded man from Norbro, with all the seriousness of the Flying Post, says to explain to people that I lack seriousness. So what Kierkegaard is saying here, disregarding the words that I am not exposed to, having not been Nordic, what he is saying is that he very much worked under Bishop Mynster. He resigned himself to what he was supposed to do, despite not agreeing with it. He did not protest as extremely as he is now, because he had some sort of a duty or an oath to him. He says there was a deeply laid purpose on my part, which I pursued with the greatest solicitude, and of my own development by the cooperation of divine governance. So he wasn't going to break any sort of oath or responsibility that he held, that he was supposed to carry out on behalf of Mynster. So he is not an enemy lashing out like so many people were claiming he was at the time, and like some people claim that he was today, having gone back and read this. So Kierkegaard continues. And as for the cry which is heard, this cry about attacking a dead man who cannot answer, etc., it may be said of this that it is a misunderstanding, also that it is chiefly a hubbub of women. I have told how the case stands. God be praised that it could be postponed as long as the old man lived. At the end, I was on the point of despairing of it. Yes, God be praised that I was spared from being obliged to embitter in the most frightful manner the last years of an old man's life by showing that, compared with the Christianity of the New Testament, the Mynsterish preaching and ecclesiastical rule, if it would not make the admission and make it as solemnly as possible that it was not the Christianity of the New Testament, was an illusion of the senses. That all his earnestness and wisdom was, Christianly considered, yeah, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that, lay majesta against Christianity, which scorns in its divine majesty to be served, as if it were politics, a kingdom of this world, by worldly shrewdness. So, what is he saying there? Kierkegaard is very much happy that Mynster is dead, that he can actually speak out against the trends and the traditions that he set in place in the Danish church, and that he didn't have to make him a bitter enemy in the last years of his life. That would have been actual betrayal, Kierkegaard is saying, as opposed to just waiting after he is dead and sort of describing to the people why things should not keep going on the way they are. That's what Kierkegaard is happy about. That Mynster is finally dead, that his influence is gone, and that it can be corrected, basically, without making him some bitter enemy. So he's going to continue. Moreover, viewing the case from another side, I have neglected nothing which might be incumbent upon me as a duty towards the cause I have the honor to serve. Towards the end of his life, I pressed upon the old man as closely as I could, but in an indirect way by training in Christianity, the question whether he would give battle by what he did. I was to my sorrow convinced how weak he was. Out of consideration for him, I concealed this from the contemporaries and said it only to him personally, as emphatically as possible. However, since this fact of his weakness was a fact, I had to employ a little precautionary measure in view of the extremist eventuality. That was done in self-examination, in which, as one can see, I dissected him, but did it, to be sure, so hiddenly that not even his enemies have seen it, so hiddenly that newspaper articles have quoted this passage to my discredit, regarding it as a eulogy of him, whereas just there I had employed my precautionary measure in view of the ultimate, which might occur, and said in effect, quote, "Your reverence is absolutely not in the character of your servants." But I hid that. And why? Naturally, because I always wished, if it were possible, to carry out my first thought, which was so dear to me. Mynster shall live out his days and be buried with full music. Privately, I have talked emphatically enough to Bishop Mynster. In my writings, I have carried out my task, and by my existence, my activity as an author, I am a constant attack upon the Mynsterish preaching of Christianity, yet in such a way that in any instant it was possible for Bishop Mynster to be making an admission, to come to an agreement with me, so that I would have been his defense. So Kierkegaard is saying here, he has tried for many years to get the head of the Danish state church to correct himself. He has been admonishing him privately, very emphatically, to get him to actually live out his Christianity and preach something real, something that was not just comfort and worldly pleasure. This was not successful. Kierkegaard had understood this weakness, so he published a very secret critique of the Danish state church and its head in newspapers, and it was so misunderstood, it was so secret in that effect, that people thought that Kierkegaard was praising him. Perhaps also that is just a testament to how lost Christianity can be in some places, that critiquing someone's Christianity as not being recognizably Christian can be taken as a compliment. You can take that either way, I'm sure. So Kierkegaard had basically just resolved to let it play out, and then after his death, so that it would not be an extreme public feud, then he would publish his more direct criticisms, not just of Mynster, but of Mynsterish preaching, of the sort of watering down and soft peddling of Christianity for respectability. This is what we're reading right here, is that direct critique. So, he's going to go on. I think that we get the point that he's trying to make there. He's going to be trying to sway Mynster in private, this head of the Danish state church, to no avail. And then Kierkegaard's going to end this article. So then, God be praised that this was attained, which was my first thought, my wish, which was so dear to me, which toward the end I was so near despairing of, that Mynster shall live out his days and be buried with full music. The monument will also be erected in his honor, but Alright, we're back. We're going to edit out that hiccup after this goes out, so to anyone that is still here, the stream is in fact back. We'll give it a little bit to continue. Did anyone get that last part of the article there? The part of the second article that we just finished, or did I drop out before that? That might be good to know for anyone still here in the chat. If in fact anyone is still here. In fact, that might be a good thing to check to see if anyone is still here. Which is really really annoying that obviously the feds took down my internet right there, just because we were about to get to the hard-hitting parts, where we really got to see Kierkegaard explain what the difference is between Christianity and this sort of very churchly preaching. But did everyone get that last part of the article, or did I drop out before then? Might be good to know. Well, with a lack of a response, I think we'll just assume that people got the last part, and if they didn't, it was just a short paragraph left. Kierkegaard was explaining that he was happy the guy's dead, and that basically it was good that he got a full funeral and whatever else, but he was most certainly not witnessing any real Christianity. So we'll carry on just with a couple more of these articles, because now that we've established what the issue is, Kierkegaard thinks that there are not necessarily non-Christians preaching in the churches, but people that are corrupting Christianity for their own benefit and for their own comfort, basically. We're going to take a couple of articles where Kierkegaard really digs into how is this Christianity fake? What specifically has gone wrong here? So give me a second while I pull the paper back up, and hopefully the internet will stay up just long enough to finish this out. So we're going to skip ahead just a little bit, because the articles in between 2 and then 5 are 2 and 5 are pretty much berating the same point, belaboring rather, because Kierkegaard is meeting a lot of public pushback from very powerful people who are criticizing him for bringing out the problems of the church. They're saying that he is starting a lot of fights. How dare he? Sure, there might be some valid criticisms of the church. Things might have been better worded in some sermons or whatever else, but they're not going to go back and fix it, and they aren't going to change anything, certainly. So Kierkegaard is just going to keep belaboring what we just read in those first 2 articles, until we get to about here. This 5th article from the Fatherland, 1855, so about a month after the last one was published. And what we're going to see here is that Kierkegaard is going to start delving into the doctrinal differences. Hopefully everyone is back and ready to go. Like I said, that little hiccup will be cut out by the time this stops being live. So we'll continue here. 2 new witnesses to the truth. Kierkegaard writing on the 29th of January, but I'm sure that this was sent in January 26th. So he says, "There is a diversity of gifts. Bishop Martensen says so justly in the Berlin News, number 302. The late bishop had an extraordinary gift for covering over the weak side of the established church and its frailties. The new Bishop Martensen, also a gifted man, has a rare gift for laying bare, by every last thing he undertakes to do, one or another weak side of the established church. The late bishop had an unusual gift for yielding shrewdly, for giving way, for accommodating himself. Bishop Martensen, for there is a diversity of gifts, has the gift at this time, especially perilous to the church, of wanting to brave it out. Yet it might be, possibly it is the thought of divine governance, that the establishment should survive, as long as the old man lived, who also was gifted to that effect, and that after his death the establishment shall fall. And to that effect we have Bishop Martensen in the episcopal chair, a man who is gifted precisely in that direction. Surely nothing more than Bishop Martensen is needed to bring that about. I perhaps shall be quite superfluous, or what I manage to do will be something entirely subordinate, And yet, even in this regard, I am not wholly without gifts, inasmuch as I have the gift to see what Bishop Martinson lays bare. Now, what I protested against was the linguistic solecism of calling what we mean by priests, deans, bishops, witnesses, or witnesses to the truth. It was against this linguistic usage I protested, because it is blasphemous, sacrilegious, but Bishop Martinson is resolved to brave it out, as one may see from his ordination address, where he spouts incessantly about witnessing, being a witness to the truth, etc. In the New Testament, Christ calls the apostles and the disciples witnesses, requiring them to witness to him. Let us see now what is to be understood by this. There are men who, by the renunciation of all things in poverty and lowliness, and thus ready for every suffering, were to go out into the world, which expresses mortal hostility to the Christian way of life. This is what Christ calls witnesses, and witnessing. What we call priest, dean, bishop indicates a livelihood, like every other employment in the community. And in a community, be it noted, where since all call themselves Christians, no danger is in the remotest degree connected with teaching Christianity, where on the contrary, this profession may be considered one of the most agreeable and most highly honored. Now I ask, is there the least resemblance between these priests, deans, and bishops and what Christ calls witnesses? Or is it not just as ridiculous to call such priests, deans, bishops, witnesses, just as ridiculous to call a maneuver on the town common a battle? No, if the clergy want to be called witnesses to the truth, they must also resemble what the New Testament calls witnesses to the truth. If they have no mind at all to resemble what the New Testament understands by witnesses to the truth, neither must they be called that. They may be called teachers, civil functionaries, professors, counselors, in short, what you will, only not witnesses to the truth. But Dr. Martinson remains indefatigable in affirming that they are witnesses to the truth. If the clergy understand their own interests, they will not hesitate to beg the bishop to go easy with this linguistic usage, which makes their whole order ridiculous. For it is true that I know several men who are highly respectable, competent, eminently competent clergymen, but I venture to assert that in the whole realm there is not a single one who viewed in the light of a witness to the truth is not comical. And to put it mildly, it is not seemly for a bishop to make the whole clerical order ridiculous. Neither is it seemly for a bishop to transform a solemn action like an episcopal consecration into something one does not know whether to laugh or cry over, all for the sake of braving out the linguistic usage of witness and witnessing to the truth. The ordination occurred the day after Christmas, the feast of the martyr Stephen. How satirical! The bishop takes occasion to say, among other things, that the word witness to the truth rings on this day with a peculiar sound. That is undeniable. Only that peculiar sound is a dissonance. For the fact that either Stephen becomes ridiculous by the help of various witnesses to the truth, whom Dr. Martinson has already to hand, or all of them become ridiculous in the character of witnesses under the light shed upon them by Stephen. So, what was Kierkegaard getting at here? He's saying that all of these clergymen in the realm have debased their office to that of a civil functionary. They're preaching what is socially acceptable to preach, what is socially advantageous to preach, not just necessarily for their own offices, but also for the community at large or for the state church. What is the current thing? That's what they would be preaching on, and they're going to be preaching in the right direction according to the state church, to put it into modern terms. And Kierkegaard is saying that this is not at all what New Testament Christianity looks like, and moreover, it is putting to shame a lot of the examples of martyrs that have gone before. It may sound like here that Kierkegaard is speaking against having some sort of a organized religion in a Christian country, but I think that would be very much a stretching of what he's getting at here. As you've heard earlier, and as you can read in other Kierkegaard's writings, there are things that are wrong in Denmark in Christianity. He's not saying that everyone's a Christian, therefore they don't need someone to be preaching to them, they don't need a priest or whatever else. And that because they are Christian, anyone preaching to them is just going to be accepted, and that then therefore there is no struggle and no Christianity. What he is saying is that these clergymen are not preaching what needs to be preached. They aren't preaching about things that the Christians in Denmark need to correct. So this is what Kierkegaard is getting at. They are preaching what is socially acceptable and sort of predetermined for them by the world. And they're making an absolute mockery out of not just Christianity, but martyrs that have gone before them that have tried to witness to Christianity, to Christ. So it turns into a very heavy charge against the clergy in Denmark, and that's why Kierkegaard is saying that if the clergy know what is good for them, they would ask their superiors to stop calling them witnesses to the truth, because that is a quite the heavy charge that's going to be laid against them later. So we'll skip this one just for now. And we'll go down to number 7, March 21st, 1855. So we're skipping a couple of months. And Kierkegaard is going to be taking to task the form of Christianity in Denmark. He's going to be talking about the substance of it, the actual church services, what you hear in the church, and what people are acting like. That's what this article is going to be dealing with, and it's a quite short one. So Kierkegaard says, when at a given time the state of the case is this, that, being privately aware, one makes as if nothing were the matter, whereas as a matter of fact everything is changed. When the teacher, the priest, is bound by an oath upon the New Testament, is ordained, whereas as a matter of fact he not only has no portrait resemblance to a disciple of Jesus Christ, but not even a caricature resemblance, no, is precisely the direct opposite of it, the trivial contrary. When the doctrine which is preached as God's word is different from God's word for the fact that it is not the same, nor the opposite, but neither one thing nor the other, which is precisely what is most contrary to Christianity and to God's word. When the situation in which we speak, and the situation is what really defines how we are to understand what is said, when the situation no more resembles that in the New Testament than a bourgeois parlor or a child's playroom resembles the most frightful conflict we are confronted with in the most appalling reality, or resembles it even less insofar as people spiritlessly pretend that the two situations resemble one another. When the state of the case is this, and then privately aware of it, people make as if nothing were the matter, is this then Christian worship, or is it treating God as a fool? Treating him as a fool by such an official worship, perhaps with the notion that, if only we call this Christianity, we can get away with it. By preachifying this at him every Sunday, we can make him believe that this is Christianity. So, this is a very short and very lengthy sentence, basically. And what is Kierkegaard saying? So, he says in this first part, he's going to tell us what the state of Christianity is in the country. The priests have sworn an oath upon the New Testament. They are thoroughly Christian priests. They are ordained to carry out whatever their Christian oath is, but they do not have a portrait-like resemblance to a disciple of Jesus Christ. Not Christ himself, but a disciple of him. They bear no resemblance, not even a caricature resemblance. That's the state of the priesthood. The doctrine that's being preached is different from the Word of God. It's not the opposite. That would be very easy for people to pick up on, and then they would know not to listen to it. And it's not just minor errors. It's something in the middle. They have changed the doctrine of God's Word in these churches, once again to conform to what the world is telling them to preach, what makes things convenient. This is most dangerous, as Kierkegaard keeps pointing out. Once again, if things are the opposite or so close to the opposite that it's obvious, Christians know to avoid that. But rather what we see is people that are convinced that they are preaching Christianity, and they have altered it in such a way that it just makes things easy to live in the world. You can accept, they can go against some of the major things that are wrong with the world, but they will never go against the unpopular things. They will never go against these in the modern day. If you were to transpose what Kierkegaard is saying here, it's like you can have churches that preach against homosexual marriage and transgenderism and whatever, but they most certainly will not compel people to live out Christian lives in terms of their family structure. In the modern day, it's very much unpopular to expound upon the full extent of a wife submitting to her husband. You won't hear that preached in very many churches at all. This is what Kierkegaard is talking about. It's not the opposite, and there are some things that they will preach against. So, Christians can be lulled into this very easily. but it is not God's doctrine or word. This is very dangerous. Something has gone terribly wrong in Christianity in Denmark, and then, as I just alluded to, in the modern day. And then he's going to talk about the situation. The situation basically meaning the church itself. If you go inside the church, the environment that Christianity is being preached in, what aesthetic is being cultivated, what mindset are the Christians using? And he's saying that it is no more similar to what we see in the New Testament than a bourgeois parlor or a child's playroom resembles basically warfare. It is nothing like it. In fact, it might be the exact opposite. So this is something where Kierkegaard is saying the exact opposite is true, yet Christians seem fine with it. And then Kierkegaard ends this after having shown people what the state of Christianity is. He just asks, are we treating God as a fool? Can we get away with treating him as a fool? If only we put Christian diction, if only we say the right phrases and have the same markings, can we really trick God and get away with this? If we preachify all of these things that we are doing wrong up here and make it seem like it is supposed to belong in the church, can we play God the fool? Back at this point in time, this would have been considered a rhetorical question, though I'm sure some people in the modern day actually believe that they can fool God by changing just a few things and by looking for loopholes. So he's going to go on and explain about fooling God, but I hope that most of the audience here can understand what has happened here. In fact, I think that we are so steeped in something that looks like this, and in fact, it is very common to hear conservative Christians talk about how wrong everything is. I don't think that we need very much more elaboration here. So instead, I think that we can skip to maybe the last article that we'll be covering today. I'm not quite certain. And I'm going to have to find it very quickly. It's going to be an article titled Salt. And I think it might be this one. Yes. So this is the 11th article that he published in the Fatherland, not too long after the last one that we just read. And Kierkegaard has this thing right up here. For Christendom, in quotes, is the betrayal of Christianity. A Christian world, in quotes, is apostasy from Christianity. This is not Kierkegaard saying that people shouldn't be Christian, that Christians shouldn't be in power, or whatever else, that there should not be a Christian society. Rather, Kierkegaard is going to explain what he means by, in quotes, Christendom, and in quotes, a Christian world. Hopefully you can kind of extrapolate where he's going with this based off of the foundations that we've laid here. So, Kierkegaard says, before a man can be made use of, as I am here, governance must coerce him dreadfully. This, too, is the case with me. Protestantism, Christianly considered, is quite simply an untruth, a piece of dishonesty which falsifies the teaching, the worldview, the life view of Christianity, just as soon as it is regarded as a principle for Christianity, not as a remedy, corrective, at a given time and place. For this cause to enter the Catholic Church would fall for all that would be. Let me restart that just real quickly here. For this cause to enter the Catholic Church would for all that be a precipitate act, which I shall not commit, but which perhaps people will expect, since in these times it is as though it were entirely forgotten what Christianity is, and even those who have the best understanding of Christianity are only tyrants. No, one can well be alone in being a Christian, and if one is not very strong in the spirit, a good maxim of human prudence is, the fewer the better. And above all in Christendom, the fewer the better. For in the last resort, precisely to the concept church, is to be traced the fundamental confusion both of Protestantism and of Catholicism. Or is it the concept Christendom? Christ requires followers, and defined precisely what he meant, that they should be salt, willing to be sacrificed, and that a Christian means to be salt, and to be willing to be sacrificed. But to be salt and to be sacrificed is not something to which thousands naturally lend themselves, still less millions, or still less countries, kingdoms, states, and absolutely not the whole world. On the other hand, if it is a question of gain and of mediocrity and of twaddle, which is the opposite of being salt, then the possibility of things begins already with the 100,000, increases with every million, reaching its highest point when the whole world has become Christian, and you could put scare quotes there. For this reason, man is interested and employed in winning whole nations of Christians, kingdoms, lands, a whole world of Christians. For thus the thing of being a Christian becomes something different from what it is in the New Testament. And this end has already been attained, has been best attained indeed completely in Protestantism, especially in Denmark. In the Danish even-tempered jovial mediocrity. When one sees what is to be a Christian in Denmark, how could it occur to anyone that this is what Jesus Christ talks about? Cross and agony and suffering, crucifying the flesh, suffering for the doctrine, being salt, being sacrificed. No, in Protestantism, especially in Denmark, Christianity marches to a different melody, to the tune of merrily we roll along, roll along, roll along. Christianity is enjoyment of life, tranquilized, as neither the Jew nor the pagan was, by the assurance that the thing about eternity is settled precisely in order that we might find pleasure in enjoying this life, as well as any pagan or Jew. Christianity simply does not exist. If the human race had risen in rebellion against God and cast Christianity off from it or away from it, it would not have been nearly as so dangerous as this knavishness of doing away with Christianity by a false way of spreading it, making Christians of everybody and giving this activity the appearance of zeal for the spreading of the doctrine, scoffing at God by offering him thanks for bestowing his blessing upon the progress Christianity was thus making. What is to be understood by being a Christian? Christ himself has declared, we can read in the Gospels. Then he left the earth, but predicted his coming again. And with regard to his coming again, there is one prediction of his which reads, when the Son of Man cometh, will he find faith on the earth? If it is all as it should be with the immense battalions of Christians, nations, kingdoms, lands, a whole world of Christians, then the prospect of his coming is remote. Seen conversely, one might well say, everything is ready for his coming. Thanks be to you, ye silk and velvet priests, who in ever more numerous troops offered your services when it appeared that profit was on the side of Christianity. Thanks be to you for your Christian zeal and fervor in behalf of these millions, of kingdoms and lands, of a whole world, of Christians. Many thanks. It was Christian zeal and fervor. For if things were to remain as they were, if only a few poor, persecuted, hated men were Christians, where was the silk and velvet to come from, and honor and prestige, and worldly enjoyment more refined than that of any voluptuary, refined by the appearance of holiness, which almost laid claim to worship? Disgusting! Even the most abandoned scum of humanity have, after all, this advantage, that their crimes are not extolled and honored, almost worshipped and adored as Christian virtues. And ye mighty ones of the earth, princes and kings and emperors, alas, that even for an instant ye could have let yourselves be beguiled by these crafty men, as though God in heaven were after all only the highest superlative of human majesty, as though in a human sense he had a cause, so that obviously it was infinitely more important to him that a mighty man, not to say a king and emperor, was a Christian, than that a beggar was. Oh my God, my God, my God. No, if there is, Christianly, any difference before God, then the beggar is infinitely more important to him than these kings, infinitely more important to the poor the gospel is preached. But true enough, to the priest, the king is infinitely more important than the beggar. A beggar, what help will he be to us? We might have to give him money. Impudent scoundrel, yes, Christianity is precisely to give money. But a king, that is prodigiously important for Christianity. Thou liar, no, but he is important for thee. For when the king is a Christian, then the group of mighty ones who are his associates follow him at once, and hence, in the case of a king who is a Christian, it is so ominous that no transition to being a Christian is effected, which is much more than a change of costume. And when the king and his mighty ones have become Christians, or are so called, then more and more follow. And hence, in the case of a king who is a Christian, it is so ominous that the whole thing becomes a change which is yet to change. And then, when the whole nation has become Christian, then, behold therefore why it is so important that the king is a Christian, then come the silk and velvet, and stars and ribbons, and all the most exquisite refinements, and the many thousands per year. The many thousands, that is blood money, for it was blood money Judas received for Christ's blood, and these thousands and millions were also blood money, which was procured for Christ's blood and by betraying Christianity and transforming it into worldliness. Only that, is it not true, thou shopkeeper's soul clad in velvet? Only that the case of Judas is almost laughable, so that on internal grounds one is nearly tempted to doubt if it is historically true that a Jew, and that is what Judas was after all, that a Jew had so little understanding of money that for 30 pieces of silver he was ready, if one would put it so, to dispose of such a prodigious money value as Jesus Christ represented, the greatest source of revenue ever encountered in the world, on which 1,000,000 quadrillions have been realized, to dispose of it for 30 pieces of silver. But we are going forward. The world is perfectible. Judas, after all, expresses something less perfect. First, because he took only 30 pieces of silver. Next, because he did not have himself honored and praised, almost worshipped and adored, as a true adherent of Christ. And thou thoughtless multitude of men, but herewith I have said enough, and to boot, wherefore I say no more. Alas, thou art not merely deceived, but thou desirest to be deceived. What help can it do thee then to have a sincere love? What does all disinterestedness help? Thou art not merely deceived, then indeed there might be some help for it, but thou desirest to be deceived. And that is the reason that I really wanted to go over these articles, was to get to this section from the Fatherland, because this is where Kierkegaard really lays into this idea that preaching Christianity just to get along, preaching peace, getting everyone nominally to be Christians, not just so that the priests themselves can have more material benefit, but also so that nominally the numbers on the graphs go up, the Christian population increases. Kierkegaard says that this is what really destroys Christianity. This idea that as long as you can get more bodies into the pew, that as long as you can collect more money and appear more pious, using that piety to mask the fact that you're just getting bodies into the pews, this is what is actually killing Christianity. And this is what Christendom has become, according to Kierkegaard. All of these nations that have converted, their monarchs have done an absolutely terrible job at ensuring that their subjects are Christians, that they act like Christians. This is the Christendom that Kierkegaard is talking about. He is not necessarily arguing for some sort of atheistic, separated church and state here, though that might be the implication for this point in time, where they are so intertwined and enriching each other. Rather, what Kierkegaard is getting at here is that the clergy in these churches that have become so dependent upon respectable opinion of the public, and upon their contributions and wealth, and upon the buildings that they so beautifully erect for them, these clergymen are driving the death of Christianity. That is what Kierkegaard is talking about here. And they are doing it in the worst way possible. They are still nominally preaching Jesus Christ in some capacity, the acceptable capacity. And they're deceiving people into thinking that they are really Christians. This, Kierkegaard says, is the most dangerous form of deception. And moreover, what Kierkegaard is getting at here, this idea that this weak and corrupt clergy that desire respectable opinion and material wealth more than anything else, they are perhaps some of the worst criminals in history. They are deceiving countless people and satiating others into thinking that they are, in fact, being real Christians. So that's what I wanted to get at here. You have to have a clergy that is not only willing to suffer, but understands that that is their purpose, being clergymen. It is impossible to just turn Christianity into peace, to only preach peace. So that's what we see today very often. We see a ton of people, a ton of clergymen preaching just peace. They want, especially the conservative clergy, they want a nation that nominally recognizes Christianity to be true, but they don't want it to actually be put into practice, because to do so would mean that their position as clergymen would suddenly become much more dangerous. They would lose their respectable opinion. They would no longer be invited to all these different intellectual gatherings, their cocktail parties, and whatever else, and they would be sidelined because they'd be preaching Christianity, which itself is very much not accepted in the world. And this is something that often gets construed, sounds like a rebuke of Christian nationalism. If you read this article once again, why Kierkegaard is attacking the idea of a Christian nation, it's not because the nation is Christian. In fact, Kierkegaard does want more people to be real Christians, people that that are willing to suffer for their faith, people that aren't just Christians for the social and material benefit. Except that that's all that these supposedly Christian states by the 1850s have done. They've turned Christianity into a social tool to either strengthen the power of the state, as you will see in some of the more Mediterranean countries where Christianity suddenly takes a much more dogmatic tone, justifying various governmental reaches into society, or it is being used to just keep society together, like a sort of a cohesiveness tool. This is what you see in England with the Church of England. It's what you see in the Scandinavian countries, even to this day, with their established churches. Kierkegaard is not mad that the countries themselves are Christians and that the society is Christian. Rather, what Kierkegaard is angry about is that, despite all of this, no measures have been taken to ensure that anyone is actually Christian. This is the same concern that you can see in Luther's Catechism, where he's talking about the absolute depravity of most clergymen, prompting the need for a catechism, where supposedly on paper there are tons of Christians in Germany, but not one person actually knows what it means to be a Christian or what the very basic doctrines are. So I think that's the main concern here. I would not construe this into an attack on Christian nationalism, because that's very clearly not the underlying motivation. Especially considering that what happens here is that Kierkegaard is saying that it would be much better if these people actually preach the opposite of Christianity, because at the very least the Christians would wake up and understand that they are being deceived and that they want to be deceived. He has no problem with the society being Christian, just that he has a problem with the society being a false Christian, a Christian that is in it for respectability and money. So hopefully people can see how this is applicable to the modern day. Hopefully people go and check out more on this. I'm hoping that this can serve this stream can serve as the baseline to more inquiry on Kierkegaard on this channel, so that I can actually bring people on to discuss the implications of these articles and of ones that we didn't discuss either. So that's the purpose of bringing up Kierkegaard here. So I think that we can just about end it there. I'll go over our very generous super chat that we got here at the last second from the Devastator, $14.99. $14.99. He says, "I love you, Turpentine." Thank you very much for the generous donation. So hopefully everyone listening has got something out of this. By the time this goes live, the little incident with my internet crashing should be edited out, so hopefully it will be a little bit more coherent. And if you need to rewatch anything to understand what the problem is, that last article that we just went over, I think, is the most self-explanatory. It really gets into the issue that despite having legions of clergymen and fancy churches across especially across the West, and people that nominally seem to be speaking about Christianity every time that they get in front of the public, they're not actually turning that many people into Christians. And you can see this as evidenced by the lives of people that consider themselves to be Christians. That is an indication that they are doing something wrong, that they are not actually preaching the word as it should be, as if they are leaving out the parts that are potentially violent or potentially unrespectable, unaccepted by the world, things that might get you kicked out of your various different groups and parties and coalitions. So that was the purpose in bringing this up. Hopefully everyone enjoyed, and next week we should be back with a guest and with a very energizing topic, critiquing once again something that is probably in the same vein as the episode last week where John and I critiqued integralism, except this time it won't be nearly as ivory tower and academic. We will be going over a very public video posted to YouTube about what a conservative is. So thank you everyone for watching. Have a good rest of the day, or a good rest of the afternoon, as it is in my time here. And hopefully this illuminated something for you all. Goodbye, everyone.